getting people to think, hopefully, to think about language and why the governments change language and don't allow language at times. And in my sense, it's all about control. It's all about the next agenda, the next thing. So I just go over a few things and get people thinking about this, and I want to read off from something here I have. So, gun violence. I'm going to start with gun violence. Gun violence, it was never existing, not in my life. I've never heard it before. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Gun violence did not exist. So what is gun violence? Well, violence, we know what violence is. Violence is when somebody does something to harm someone else or against an object or a team or a group of people. They get violent. That's where violent is. Violent. So now this gun violence thing, well, why would they say gun violence? Well, because if they can capitalize that or get on that or group that and get that to be evil, that is the form of where we have to go to, take stuff away, to control stuff, to fix this bad thing, and this bad thing now is gun violence. It's ridiculous if you think about it. I mean, just the changing of the language and what it actually means, because people continue, they pick that up, they use that, and now gun violence is on, it's on the television media, it's everywhere, it's social media, it's gun violence. People use it like it's just normal because everyone else uses it, everyone else recognizes it, everyone else knows what it is, so we're just going to use it because it's now part of the new language. Well, that's how that happens. And why that's not good is because people don't realize it. They're like, well, it's not a big deal. Everyone uses it. They know what it is. But it is a big deal. Because if you get that kind of stuff embedded in the language and the makeup and get people thinking about that, then they don't think 2 seconds of, well, gun violence doesn't make sense because I never heard it before. For example, I never heard of hammer violence. I've never heard of baseball bat violence. I've never heard of tennis racket violence. Never heard of golf club violence. How about broom violence? Knife violence, drug violence. We have water violence. Or how about ice violence? Someone's been pushing someone around when it's icy outside. So you push them over, old people or young people, whatever, to harm them. A violent act. It's not called ice violence or water violence or hydration violence or whatever you want to call it. Fire violence. So arsons never go to jail or prison because of fire violence or arson violence. Well, arson is arson. I mean, lighting people's stuff on fire is lighting people's stuff on fire. It's illegal, and so it doesn't need that stipulation of, well, it's fire violence, it's arson violence. Rope violence. How about if you're hanging people or if you're strangling people? Mass murderers are strangling people, and this guy is using nothing but rope and cables. So now he is rope violence or cable violence or strangle violence. It's ridiculous. Just these are just stupid to say and think about. How about book violence? If you whip a big dictionary or a Bible or something at someone's head or beat them over the head with it. Book violence. That's a dumb saying. It's a dumb thing to say or even talk about. Well, I think that's just as dumb as food violence or just as dumb as gun violence. How about firearm violence? Or how about, arrow violence? It's slingshot violence. It's just ridiculous in itself to say this, but people say it, and then they get used to it. It gets embedded, and then becomes the norm, and then it gets more accepted and more accepted, so then it's easier to take things away or to direct the way things are going to move, or the way they're going to take other rights away, or the ability of people, period, whether they can use things or not. Because, well, that can stir up a lot of gun violence in the inner city, or it can stir up a lot of gun violence in the school, or stir up a lot of gun violence in the postal services. There's no such thing as gun violence. Get over it. It's ridiculous itself. Just like all those examples I said. So my next thing is why I'm so adamant about this, because my next thing, I bet that's going to be involved. It's going to come to. It's going to become part of the language. Everyone's going to pick up on it. Is language violence. I haven't heard anyone speak it yet. I haven't seen it anywhere in the media or anything like that. But language violence or some sort like that that alludes to that, why would they want that? Well, because you can't put people down. You can't, make people feel bad. It's all about feelings nowadays, which nothing else real matters. It's all about feelings. So language violence is the next big step. And then if you have language violence, my guess is there's going to be some time in the next few years, 5 at the most is my guess, language violence is going to be a norm. It's going to be just as common as gun violence is. People will be put in prison for language violence. They will be put in prison for language violence. They were put in prison back with the heads of states or the heads of countries or whatever, the dictators, whoever you want to pick, Mao or Hitler, people point to that, or whoever you want to say. Che, it's just because of what they said, they're put in prison. They're stuff taken away. Put in prison by force with people with guns to put the other people in prison, keep them in prison because they protect the walls and the bars and all that kind of stuff they call protect with the use of guns. And so they use their gun violence against the prisoners or against it could be free people or guilty people, parties where you want to look at, to get them, arrested and in prison. They use their gun violence, their threats of violence with a gun, whatever you want to call it, which is ridiculous on itself, on its face, from me saying. So, anyways, I think this is as stupid as just some examples here. Epic, the word epic, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. No one really knew what it was, but I always thought epic was huge. This thing that was just so huge that it was just unbelievable how big and epic this thing was, whether that is a scene or whatever it is. And nowadays, people use epic like it's, going out of style, like it's Kleenex. Just like what happened to awesome, just like what happened to a whole bunch of other, words throughout the language. And then another example is the fossil fuels thing. Well, petroleum or gas or oil or whatever you want to call it. Gasoline, oil is not fossil fuels. There's nothing fossil about it whatsoever. Nothing's fossil about it. You do a little research and that kind of stuff, you figure that out. It's a hot bio atmosphere, hot bio, it's inside, it's the core, it's renewable energy. Absolutely. It has nothing to do with fossils. There's nothing fossil about it, but it was something that was created, something that was made to ensure the abundance or the lack of abundance and the urgency to get this out there and charge so much for it, because back then oil, you want to call it oil, was as available almost as water on the planet. And everyone knew it. Everyone knew it back then. I'm talking back then with Rockefeller and stuff. Everyone knew it. The only way to get people to clamp on and say, well, yeah, I have to pay for this, and I have to pay a high amount for this, is because, well, it's limited, and we're going to run out. We're going to be at our peak, our oil peak, or whatever you want to call it. We're going to be at the peak in whatever year, whatever decade, whatever. They've said it many times over. It's never happened. And then those oil wells that dried up, quote unquote, now have filled back up for the most part. And now it's there. And no explanation for it. They don't question it. They don't ask. They're just happy it's there. But that's because it's not fossil fuels. It's nothing to do with fossil fuels. And just the thought of itself, the way it is, it's not a fossil. It's not from a fossil. A fossil has nothing to do with the skin and the vegetation and the insides, the guts, everything that they're talking about that crushed the dinosaurs and that kind of stuff that create this oil, this gas, whatever you want to call it. That was the whole lie that people were indoctrinated with, throughout elementary school and so on. So anyways, I went on that little rant, but I want to say this little piece here. Just thinking about that language violence. This is from, I have March 6th of 2023, was updated. And this is Tallahassee, Florida. A Republican lawmaker in Florida wants bloggers who write about elected officials to register with the state. A proposal that's raised First Amendment concerns and the ire of GOP firebrand Newt Gingrich, la 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 la. So anyways, to sum it up, a Republican lawmaker in Florida wants bloggers who write about elected officials to register with the state. Boom. What is that? So the bill filed Senator Jason Brodeur of Lake Mary would require bloggers to file periodic reports with the state if they are paid for posts about the state's governor, lieutenant governor, cabinet members, or legislative officials. Bloggers would have to disclose who paid them, how much, along with other information such as where the post is located online. They would be fined $25 per day. The report, if the report is late, up to a maximum of $2,500 for each report. The legislation would not apply to content on the website of the newspaper, article, other similar publications, just anywhere else that would apply. So now, in order for you to do it anywhere else other than the approved newspaper or the approved whatever rag that you're writing for, or your article might be in, or whatever it is, that's okay. But anything beyond that, anything posted online, anything else, you need to register. You need to file your papers, pay for permission to do this stuff as a blogger, to write about a public official. So it came in, and then it sort of got shot down and that kind of stuff. But the lawmaker's still adamant about it. He still wants it, and there are other people that support it. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen right now. I'm not saying that it's going to happen ever. But my guess and my hunch is that that is one of the next rungs in this whole deal is language violence, to get to that point where it's going to be controlling language. Because if you control language, there's no free conversations. There's no free information available to people. It's only what's okayed. It's only what goes through a funnel of approved items that people are allowed to hear and then judge from there. And they can't get anything else because it's illegal. It's language violence or whatever they're going to call it. But I just want to say how stupid that sounds. Is just as stupid as gun violence, just as stupid as food violence, just as stupid as drug violence, just as stupid as fire violence, just as stupid as rope violence, book violence, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, if you like this, like, share, subscribe, share, and as always, stay vigilant, protect yourself, and